Hey, this is Double R. I wanted to tell you that Anchor by Spotify is a great and easy way to make a podcast with everything you need and all in one place. Anchor has the tools to allow you to record, edit your podcast straight from your phone or your computer. When hosting with Anchor, you can distribute your podcast to all listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Best of all, it's totally free. So go down the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. This is the Let's Roll Podcast with your host, Double R. What's up, everybody? It's Double R, the host that rose the most, and this is the Let's Roll Podcast. Today's episode, I have my mom in the studio with me. Say hi, Mom.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about some of the subjects we're going to be talking about is her raising me, taking care of me. Also going to kind of celebrate her birthday and Mother's Day because they're all in the same month. And we're going to do all that right after this. So, Mom, do you remember the day I was born? Or what do you remember of the day I was born?
What do I remember the day you were born?
Like,
I was in a lot of pain. No, I probably wasn't in a lot of pain because we kind of planned to go to the hospital. And so I don't really remember being in any great amount of pain until, not physical pain, emotional pain.
mm-hmm.
When the doctors came in and told us the news that you were born with over 100 fractures and that you were going to be an extremely breakable baby.
Did they know exactly, like, did they have a diagnosis right then and there, do you remember? Or did they not even know why I had that many fractures?
I don't know if they knew. They didn't tell me immediately.
Okay.
But a lot of specialists were called in, and within an hour or so, we had the diagnosis that you had osteogenesis imperfecta. It was going to mean you had very fragile bones.
Mm-hmm.
A little tiny baby with over 100 fractures at birth. And so that was pretty scary. To me, you were so little because your brother was so big. When he was there, it was just like a...
You, obviously, from what I've been told or remember, you weren't able to hold me in the hospital.
No, I didn't.
Because I was sequestered.
And you were also in an incubator.
Okay.
And we would go to the baby nursery and look through the window, and I could see you in the incubator. And then later you were moved to a little isolate bed, which is clear plastic thing. And I guess the hardest thing was having to leave the hospital without you.
Before you got to the hospital, or on the way to the hospital, is it right that Dad had to go park the car and you were taken in first? Like you were taken in, but he had to go move the car or something.
Well,
he wasn't.
Took me into the emergency room exit or entrance. And he turned me over to a nurse and he said, right, I'm going to go park the car.
Right. But he wasn't, obviously you didn't have a normal birth, right?
Yeah, it was fairly normal.
Was he in the room when I was born or did he miss that?
I don't think he was actually in the room when I delivered the baby, no.
Okay. So I was born, how many days were you in the hospital? Do you remember being in the hospital? Couple of days?
I'm going to say 6 days.
Okay, and then they left.
We went home.
Now, I've heard two different versions. I've heard I was only supposed to live for 3 days, or I was only supposed to live 3 weeks.
Well, it moved from 3 days. We'll kind of up it to 3 weeks in a little while, and it says,
but I also...
if you are still doing well in 3 weeks. So
which then I was told at one time that 2 weeks later... they said you can come get it.
I don't really, you're 51 years old. I can't remember what I did yesterday.
I'm just going by what I've been told over the years or whatever.
Well, it was something like that. You didn't come home immediately. We had to go back and pick you up.
Right.
And
then there's a part that we kind of...
One part I remember is that I took a little outfit for you to wear, and I was in this little isolated room, and the nurse kept not coming to dress you, so I dressed you. And the nurse said, "You dressed him?" I said, "Yes."
So there's a part that we kind of, I'm going to say not skipped, but didn't mention. But when I was born, or after I was born, and the doctors and nurses, from what I remember from the story, was they didn't know what it was at first. And they kind of had this, like, the least the way I was told, they didn't really want to do very much. Like,
really, I think.
And then Dr. Womack came in.
Dr. Womack was my husband's cousin, and he was a pediatrician. And so we had to call him in from another town. He lived in a different town. But he came in, and then we had another pediatric specialist and a bone specialist. Now, the main bone specialist that you had most of your life was Dr. George Lane.
Right.
I don't think he was called in at your birth. He was called in much later.
Yeah.
Or we went to him much later.
He
was a very good doctor, and
was he my bone surgeon or doctor? I know you said he came in much later, but did I see other, like maybe a couple of doctors before we got to him?
Well, not an orthopedic doctor, no.
Okay.
Just the orthopedic doctors that were in the hospital when you were born. And then, and you stayed in the hospital for, I think, 3 weeks. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But anyway, then when you came home, I think one of the doctors at the hospital recommended taking you to Dr. Lane.
Okay.
And so we did, and we're very glad that we went to him.
And I guess I saw Dr. Lane, I guess all the way up to my high school years.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Lane was a very well-known doctor. He was the head of orthopedics at Baylor College of Medicine. He was head of orthopedics at several different hospitals. Right. And so he was very well-known.
Now, initially when I was born and they told you what I had, which is osteogenesis imperfecta, what was your mindset like? What were you, because you said it was emotional, so I want to know, like, I'll say this, as long as I've known you, as long as I've been alive, you are very strong person. I don't see you cry often, especially in high, we'll call it panic, stress situations. Like you have this, and I have it too, and I know I got it from you because I definitely didn't get it from Daddy because Daddy just couldn't handle a lot of things. But I've always admired how you could just be like, okay, like situation. Sorry about that. The situation is a situation. So you just go with whatever's going on. Now, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you cry later, get upset later when everything's kind of calmed down and you have a moment to reflect on it. But I hardly ever see you really panic.
I'm a pretty calm person when there's emergencies and stuff like that. And even when I get upset, I don't necessarily hide it. I may be crying on the inside, but I'm not crying on the outside.
Right.
Or I might tear up, but I'm not.
There's only a few times that I've seen you, and I'm going to say in an emotional situation, that you tear up and you cry. And that was when Mama Sweet passed away, and you got up and had to start talking about her. Of course, I'm the type of person, I don't cry until I see somebody else start crying. I'm all good until I see somebody, and usually it's somebody I don't expect to cry. Like I have this thing, like looking at my brother. For the longest time, I didn't think my brother would cry about something. I mean, first time I ever saw him cry was at a funeral, and then I started crying because, yeah, you can tell something's wrong.
In a normal voice.
Yeah. So going back, like I said, what was your first thing that you can remember that you were concerned about with me?
Well, I have been around children all my life. My mother kept children, and I babysat from the time I was 10 years old all the way up. I had childcare in my home, 6 to 10 kids, 5 days a week for 20 years. I was, part of the time you were there. But anyway, I was well able to handle children. And I had a little uncle that was very, orthopedically challenged and mentally challenged. And I grew up with him, and he was fun. And, he was retarded also, but he had a little crippled arms and legs. And
was Sarge considered, I know you said mentally challenged, but what's the word? What's the Down syndrome? He didn't have
No, he didn't have. He was just He was just mentally challenged and just slow. He never quite knew exactly what to do or what to say, and he was a fun little guy. He was very small. He had a little crippled arm that, like, he didn't have his forearm. He just had an elbow and a little short space and a hand on one hand, and then the other one arm, and the other arm was fairly normal.
He was really cool. I really liked to be around.
He was a fun little guy. He had a way about him that you just.
What's the first break you can remember me having?
Oh, well, I rolled you over, just helped you roll over, and you rolled over on your arm, and your arm broke, and I thought I was going to go to pieces.
There's a story that you tell about going to the ER, and I have broken arm, leg, or whatever. I don't remember exactly which one it was. And the ER person asked you,
how did your baby break his arm? I said, well, he was crawling across the floor and his arm broke. And the doctor said, ma'am, babies' arms don't just break when they crawl across the floor. And I said, well, they do if they have osteogenesis imperfecta. And he looked at me because I said this great big medical term. He says, is that what your baby had? I said, look at him. He's screaming osteogenesis imperfecta at you.
To this day.
And I heard that from Dr. Lane when somebody asked him something. He says, well, he's screaming osteogenesis imperfecta at you. And I told this doctor, he says, is that what he has? I said, you tell me, you're the smart ass doctor.
And then you asked him, like, do you know Dr. George H. Lane? And he said,
how do you know him?
Yeah. And you're like, well, that's his doctor. Why don't you go call him?
Call him and ask him if his diagnosis was right.
I have said this before in other episodes, and I know you'll totally agree. Like, if it's possible, don't take your OI child to the ER.
Well, I mean, I avoided the ER like the plague because I'd have all of these questions.
Right.
And but also Dr. Lane had already showed us how to put a splint on and how to put a cast on and how to wrap your arm and your whole body if you're broken. And if your leg was broken, we did this, we did that. We just learned from him that we could handle most of the fractures. It was ridiculous to run to the hospital with a fracture.
Right.
Because we would not necessarily set the fracture. We could keep it from moving around. And we had plaster and casting materials. We had ace bandages coming out the back door. And to have a whole hospital emergency room.
Let's get into that right after this. Okay, so I'm born. You got a child with OI, can break on a dime, literally. And as you just mentioned, our doctor, George H. Lane, taught you and Daddy how to not only kind of set the bone, try to get it as straight as possible and put it in a splint. We only did splints, or did we do a full cast? I think we only did splints, didn't we?
Well, we mostly did splints, but because that's what you required. But there were a few times we put a whole arm cast on your arm or on your leg. If it was the lower part of the leg, the upper part of the leg is kind of hard to put a cast on. So,
So in this part, Mom, I know you have a ton of stories, and if you're on Facebook and you look her up, she'll tell you whatever you want to know. I want to talk about a couple of them, just a few.
Okay.
One of them, I actually have a picture where you're cutting my body cast with a hacksaw.
We used to go, even though we still use Dr. George H. Lane,
Right.
he was part of the staff Texas Rehabilitation and Research Hospital. And so they were very famous there. Not Dr. Lane, but other doctors were very famous about putting a cast on so tight that you could, and your stomach could start turning blue, and you couldn't breathe, and you were crying.
You couldn't poop.
And so
pooping was necessary.
I have to fix this. He can't stay like this.
Right.
And so I don't know if I actually used the hacksaw to cut the cast off.
Yes, you did, because it's in the picture.
Well, I couldn't. Hey, bring me that back.
It was at Mama Swede's trailer.
We were outside. Maybe that's all we had to work with. But we loosened the cast up so that your stomach could expand. And they had left a hole there.
Right.
And your stomach was pooched out of that, and it's turning blue. And I said, this child is in pain. I need to fix it. So I fixed it.
I will say this about my mom. Growing up, my mom just took care of things. Like she, especially when it came to me, and even now that I'm 51 years old, Mom will do things. Like I will mention to Mom, like, Mom, I'm having a hard time opening this door or closing this door or whatever it might be. And I just say it in passing. I don't say it like, Mom, fix this. I'm just like saying it. And next thing I know, Mom's already rigged this thing up for me to be able to close the door. Like, she is very proactive, and me and my mom, at least me for sure, have a saying, oh, it might not be right, might be the right way to do it, but it works. It still does the job. Another story I want to get into, and I tell this story a lot, especially when I'm talking about Dad. For me, I always thought Dad had a guilt because of my disability. But I also know he couldn't handle it.
That's what I would say more than anything. He could not handle the emotional side of it. And
so this particular time, I think you're taking care of a broken leg. Well, it's a broken leg. And I'm up on the counter in the kitchen, and Dad comes up behind you, and I'm screaming or crying or whatever I'm doing. I did cry and yell and scream when I was younger when I broke something, but as I got older, I just got to the point where shit, broke my leg. But anyway, my dad came up behind us, and he used the famous, "You want me to give you something to cry about?" And I don't know, I said this to a friend the other day, how we remember things, or when we're telling a story, we say things in the story that we obviously didn't say when I was whatever age I was, but my answer was, a damn broken leg ain't good enough. But what was your response? Because I love how your response was.
I had to respond several million times, I guess. But I remember one time, and this may be the time you're talking about, he was yelling at you because you were crying. And I said, he has a damn broken leg, and if you can't handle it, you go outside. Or something like that. You know.
The way I remember you said it, like you just calmly turned there and went, "You can leave." Like you can go away.
Have done that.
Like
before.
go away.
Go away.
I only remember Dad doing what I call your job, maybe once or twice, and I think he only did it when we were on vacation, and that broke something. I remember Dad setting my leg one time. Yeah. Not that my dad didn't know how to do all that stuff, but I was with my mom majority of the time. My dad was a police officer. He worked all kinds of crazy hours. So I was basically with my mom. I have a closer relationship with you than I did with Dad. Kenneth had a closer relationship with Dad than he does with you. And it's just been that way forever. What did you think? I'm going to ask this question, and we'll take a little break so you can think about it for a second. What did you think my life would become when I got older? And we'll get right to that right after this. So, me growing up as a child with a disability, with the type of disability I had, what were your hopes and dreams for me, if you had any?
I don't know if I had any great hopes and dreams that just any parent doesn't have for their kids, but I I knew there was an obstacle in the way. You just couldn't do everything that everybody else did. But to give you an example, you wanted to have roller skates one time. And I said, well, Rusty, you have to be able to walk to use roller skates.
Yep.
And I said, how about a skateboard? I can get a skateboard? I said, yeah, you can get a skateboard. I can really get a skateboard, Mom? I said, yes, you can get a skateboard.
Couldn't have the damn roller skates. But
I said, you can't stand up on it like other kids do, but you can lay down on it and you can scoot down the sidewalk, lickety split, and fall and break your arm.
Do you remember my go-to ride-on toy? Or
Wiggle wagon.
Yes.
You had a little thing called a wiggle wagon, and it had a little flat area to sit on, and then it has the handlebars, and you just had to wiggle the handlebars.
And my feet were on the handlebars were made for my feet to sit on, and the handles came up, and you wiggled it back and forth to go. And they used to have more professional or more adult-oriented ones at the skating rink. They weren't called wiggle wagons, but let's see, what else do I want to ask you?
Well, you wanted to go to the roller rink, and we let you. But
going back, now that you've seen me grown up, what was the one thing that I did in my adult life that you were proud of me for?
The one thing?
Like, I mean, I know there's several things that I've done, but...
Well, I think the most remarkable thing, and everybody thinks this, I think, to some extent, is that you can drive a car. And you wanted to drive a car. Now you had to go and take some special training. You started with driver's ed in school.
Yep.
And then he had to go to TIRR, which is the hospital.
And get evaluated and all that.
And get evaluated. And this happened so long ago, I don't know how to do it. Well, but now he drives everywhere, even drives me places.
I learned, here's the story about me driving. I learned to drive, or took driver's ed, like you said, in high school. The only reason I ever took driver's ed was because of Dad. Because Dad, I had to find an elective class in high school to take. My senior year. And Dad's like, well, take driver's ed. They have to provide you with ability, the way to do that. So they can't deny you. I'm like, drive? What? Because I never really thought about driving, ever. Like, I just figured I'm just going to be chauffeured around everywhere I go. So I took driver's ed. Now, the kicker was, we found out when I was taking driver's ed that the state had a state program that would pay for the equipment to be put in my vehicle before we knew this part. Once I got a license, they would help pay for the equipment, blah, blah, blah. But here was the kicker about that. I go through driver's ed, and then I meet with DARS, which was the people that ran the program, and we asked them, okay, hey, he's completed driver's ed. Now we need to give him a car that he can drive to go take his test. And they said, we don't equip a car until he has a driver's license. How am I supposed to get a car? Driver's license without a car.
Or a vehicle.
So the teacher, my teacher, arranged for me to take the driver's ed car that was handicap equipped, but it was really handicap equipped for an upper able-bodied person. In other words, it's only
normal stature. Too.
It's normal stature, normal size that couldn't use his legs or use their legs, but they could use their hands. So
because you're very short.
I'm very short. I have to sit very close to the steering wheel, and I'm also driving a car that I can barely turn the wheel. Like I using everything I got to turn it. And then the hand controls were bad for me just because of my short arms, because I couldn't, I had to lean and all that. It was very difficult to drive that car. Now I got to go take my test. And I'm not going to tell all the details, but basically during the test, the police officer that was in the car with me had to use the brake on his side of the car twice during my test because I screwed up twice. But with all the mistakes I made, I passed. And I was so proud of myself for passing. So that's how I got the ability to drive a car. Staying on driving. And I think I might have told this story in another episode, but we can kind of briefly talk about it. The day that I had my accident and how everybody in my family were all in different directions. And like I said in the previous episode, I had a van. I rolled my van, had this accident, got a hold of I called my work, told them that I was in an accident, but I was still kind of out of it, but I'm in an accident, I'm not coming. And they called Dad.
They couldn't get a hold of
You couldn't get it back a hold of me. I was trying to get a hold of Kenneth, and by the time they took me out of the van, Kenneth was there. About 10 feet away, or maybe further, the ambulance. Mm-hmm. They get me out of the van, Kenneth's right there. I tell Kenneth I broke my arm and my leg, and then by the time, which was not that far away, but by the time I got to the ambulance, Daddy was there. And it wasn't that long, and Dad
couldn't get a hold of me,
and they couldn't
because I was at the hospital with a friend having a heart attack. I mean, I wasn't having a heart attack; my friend was having a heart attack, so I was already there.
Right.
And the nurse came in and said, "Mrs. Bench, the ambulance has arrived, and your son is here."
No, you heard the nurse said that they had a 37-year-old male patient coming from whatever area I was coming from, and you heard that. Mm-hmm. And you went to the nurse and said...
And I said, did you say Rusty Bench?
And they might have said osteogenesis imperfecta. Maybe.
Well, I think they just said your name. But anyway...
They didn't know for sure. At the time that you asked, they didn't know for sure it was me. Yeah. But you said it has to be him coming from that area.
Yeah. And
that's when they asked you if you wanted to go outside. When the ambulance got there, and you were like, no.
I'll just wait for him to bring me in.
And they were like, no, come. And then you came out, and came out with the nurse, and the nurse said, what is the patient's name? And they said, Rusty. And she goes, oh, Rusty, Mom's here. Are you okay? And I said, I broke my arm, and broke my damn arm and leg.
I said, get him out.
But like I said, that's a story I'm pretty sure I told in another episode, longer version. I would have thought, I mean, driving is a big accomplishment, but I would have thought you would have said DJing. That would have been one of those things that you, and the only reason I say that is because Daddy was so against me doing that. Did not think I was going to make money and all that.
I thought you were talking about at a younger age, did I?
No, I'm just in general through my life. I mean, what are the things that you've looked at and went, I'm proud of you. Like, I'm sure you're proud of everything I pretty much ever did in my life. I mean, I started my own business. I learned to drive. I got married. I've had several jobs throughout my life. She even helped me move out of the house. And I didn't tell my dad I was moving. I left him a letter.
Move back in. And now he takes care of me.
I'm not going to go into the moving out and living on my own because that's a whole nother episode. But I'm going to take one more break. And then when we're going to come back, we're going to talk to my mom about turning 76 years old on her birthday. Because her birthday is this month, plus it's Mother's Day. So we're going to talk about her in a little bit right after this. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this first part of this episode. Make sure you check us out on the letsrollpodcast.com. Check it out on all of our social media. Look forward to the second part coming out next. And as always, until next time, let's roll.
Hey, this is Jenny Haney, and you're listening to the Let's Roll podcast with host Double R. Make sure you're following us on all of social media. Find the links below in the description or at the letsrollpodcast.com.